and ensure that America's small businesses can continue to access the credit they need to build our economy. Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time in reserve.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves his time. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today the House considers H.R. 3336, a bill that makes clarifying changes to the Dodd-Frank Act. Like two other Dodd-Frank bills with the House passed previously, H.R. 2779, the Inter-Affiliate Bill, and H.R. 2682, the Margin Bill. This legislation was crafted in a bipartisan manner. As the Ag Committee continues to oversee the implementation of Dodd-Frank, I have firmly believed that the CFTC is ultimately going to get the rules and regulations right. If you look at the Dodd-Frank rules that have already been completed, by and large, they have been bipartisan and responsive to the concerns that we have heard during our oversight hearings. For example, during a legislative hearing last year, we heard concerns about business conduct standards and the potential impact that could have on pension plans' ability to use swaps to hedge risk. When the Commission approved a bipartisan final rule establishing these business conduct standards, the general response from the pension community was satisfaction. More recently, the CFTC approved last week, again with a bipartisan vote of 4-1, rules defining who will be subject to Dodd-Frank's new oversight. Again, the general view from the end-user community is that the rule addresses their concerns. In fact, I believe one of the bills the committee voted on earlier, H.R. 3527, which rewrote the swap dealer definition, now no longer seems necessary. I talk frequently with CFTC Chairman Gensler, and from what he has told me, I am confident that the remaining concerns of H.R. 3336 seeks to address will ultimately be resolved satisfactorily by the CFTC. I think some want to use this bill to send a message to the CFTC, and since that message is consistent with the original intent of Dodd-Frank, I have no objection to it. As originally considered by the committee, H.R. 3336 is meant to address concerns raised by the farm credit institutions, credit unions, and small banks that worry about being forced to clear. Under current law, the CFTC is supposed to develop an asset-based exemption from clearing. When you look at the swap activity and some of the bank's questions, were raised whether a fixed asset test was appropriate. A risk-based test contained in the bill will, I think, prove more than adequate and certainly will provide incentives to banks to be more robustly back up their swap positions to the extent that they are not doing so now. During the committee's markup of H.R. 3336, Representatives McIntyre and Owens raised concerns they heard on behalf of captive finance companies, which fears that the exemptions provided to them under the Dodd-Frank law will not be implemented properly. This bill not only addresses those concerns, it closed a potential loophole in Dodd-Frank which could have allowed captive finance companies to use the original Dodd-Frank exemption to engage in speculation or swap activities unrelated to the commercial business without proper oversight. Also during the markup, Representative Costa raised concerns on behalf of California utilities which fear being classified as swap dealers for entering into transactions necessary to comply with state regulations. Working with members of the California delegation, we were able to adequately address these concerns as well. Now, given that this legislation clarifies what Congress intended to do with the original Dodd-Frank law, I urge my colleagues to support its passage, and with that, Madam Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Minnesota reserves. The gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I would like to yield 4 minutes to the gentlelady from Missouri, Mrs. Hartzler, who is the primary sponsor of our important piece of legislation today.
Gentlelady from Missouri, recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for bringing this forth and for our bipartisan support for this bill. I'm pleased to bring the Small Business Credit Availability Act forward today in order to help small businesses, American manufacturers, farmers, and consumers to access the credit they need in order to grow our economy. Madam Speaker, we need jobs in our country. We need manufacturing to stay strong in America, and we need small businesses to be able to grow. They can't do that if Washington stands in the way. The Small Business Credit Availability Act removes the onerous barriers to credit imposed by the 2009 Dodd-Frank bill governing a bank's ability to offer low-rate fixed loans to small businesses and manufacturers. This bill also removes the barriers to low-rate fixed loans for credit unions, farm credit banks, rural electric cooperative infrastructure lenders, and finance companies who offer credit to their customers. Without this bill, the Farm Credit Council alone expects that substantial new costs between $6 million and $27.2 million a year will be added to their cost of doing business, all for new processes and red tape that are not needed. It is important that local businesses, local manufacturers, and local farmers be able to access low-rate interest loans from local financial entities. This bill keeps the business in the local communities where it belongs by reducing the costly new regulations imposed by the 2009 bill. In addition, it clarifies a provision of Dodd-Frank to ensure that manufacturers will be able to continue to provide credit to customers who buy their products. We need to do everything we can to keep manufacturing here in America, and H.R. 3336 helps do that. Lastly, our bill clarifies that state utilities aren't unduly burdened by Dodd-Frank when complying with state law as they enter into contracts. It's time for Washington to cut the unnecessary red tape that hampered jobs creation. By passing this Small Business Credit Availability Act, Congress will remove the barriers and clear the way for local entities to do business at home and create jobs while doing it. I urge all my colleagues to support this vital bill. And with that, I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentlelady from Missouri yields back her time. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Madam Speaker, I now yield the distinguished gentleman from California such time as he may consume.
Gentleman from California for as much time as he may consume.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of H.R. 3336, the Small Business Credit Availability Act. The bipartisan measure received unanimous support in the House Committee on Agriculture and ensures, as the previous speakers have indicated, that small financial entities such as community banks, farm credit system institutions, credit unions will not be burdened with costly regulations resulting from the reform of our financial system. That was never Congress's intent. I appreciate very much Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson and their staffs for working with, as well as the bill's sponsor, Representative Hartzler, to reach an agreement with not only myself but my colleagues, Congressman Baca, Cardozo, who are also on the committee, as well as the California delegation, on the underlying text of this bill. Without your supports, obviously, we could not address this issue pertaining to California. And while we work to maintain the viability of the small businesses recognized in H.R. 3336, we also must look for ways to avoid the unintended consequences resulting from the implementation of the Dodd-Frank Act on other entities, in this case such as utilities. And it's always the difficult challenge we have in Congress, the law of unintended consequences that we must respond to. Because of California's regulatory environment, I expressed concerns in the committee that California's energy providers, our utility companies, might be or would be inadvertently, as we believe, swept up by the swap dealer definition, which is the efforts that the committee has addressed. Over several weeks, we worked together with the staff and the utilities to develop language that provides the clarity needed to ensure that companies within California that provide energy for all businesses and residences, which are ultimately California's ratepayers, are not penalized by the federal regulators for simply complying with state law. H.R. 3336 includes language clarifying that the actions undertaken to comply with state or local laws or regulations are excluded in determining whether or not an entity is considered a swap dealer. Let me be specific. The language clarifies that 1, resource adequacy contracts entered into satisfy California's Public Utilities Commission procurement requirements. 2, renewable energy credits used to satisfy California's renewable portfolio standard. 3, and emission allowances to satisfy California's greenhouse gas regulations should not, and this is the key line, should not be considered in determining whether or not an entity is a swap dealer. For my colleagues, we should understand that the situation we're dealing with in these examples, these transactions are closely regulated by the California's Public Utility Commission or the California Air Resources Board, and they pose no systemic risk to our financial systems or to the ratepayers. While California is currently affected, it is possible that these concerns could be shared by energy providers in other states, and that's why the committee in their wisdom chose to address this issue and to help not only California, but possibly its extent to other states that might be similarly affected. For these reasons, I encourage my colleagues to support this bill, and I yield back the balance of my time, and I once again want to thank the chairman, thank Ranking Member Peterson, Chairman Lucas, and the author of the bill, Representative Hartzler. Thank you very much.
Gentleman from California yields. The gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schilling, 4 minutes.
Gentleman from Illinois for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I rise in support of H.R. 3336, the Small Business Credit Availability Act. Madam Speaker, I've only been in Congress for a little over a year, but I have found the House Committee on Agriculture to be very bipartisan, and I believe that is in large part due to the leadership of Chairman Lucas and Ranking Member Peterson. I come to the floor today to speak in support of a bipartisan provision in the bill that is important to the American manufacturing sector, and particularly to Illinois companies like John Deere and Caterpillar, which employ almost 150,000 men and women. Many of the manufacturers here at home have what are called captive finance affiliates, whose function is to provide loans and leases to customers to purchase goods that they make. The credit that captive finance companies provide is essential to agricultural producers, construction contractors, and manufacturers, and the jobs they support here at home. Congress provided an exemption in the current law for captive finance affiliates so that when they hedge risks associated with providing loans to their customers, they receive the same exemptions available to the parent company and other end users. However, there is a lack of guidance in the CFTC's implementation of the exemption, leading to concern that these captive finance companies could be subject to mandatory clearing requirements or regulated as major swap participants. There is bipartisan agreement that this is not what Congress originally intended. H.R. 3336 will provide the needed clarification for our manufacturers and their captive affiliates. It does so while also providing safeguards against abuse. First and foremost, this only applies to entities that use derivatives to manage their risks, meaning they cannot, I repeat, cannot use derivatives to speculate. In addition to these entities cannot engage in financing that does not facilitate the sale of their manufactured products. The CFTC will have the authority to prevent affiliates from qualifying for this exemption. Again, I appreciate the bipartisan nature of providing certainty on this issue. I want to thank Chairman Lucas, Ranking Member Peterson, Congressman Bill Owens, Congressman Mike McIntyre, Congressman Randy Nagelbauer for their efforts in this issue. I also really want to thank the majority and minority House Ag and their staff for the work on this issue, especially Ryan McKee and Clark Ogilvie. It is an important certainty that we provide for our folks back home. And with that, ma'am, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Illinois yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Minnesota.
I reserve.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Conaway, 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Texas, recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Speaker, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 3336, the Small Business Credit Availability Act. Today's bill makes several narrow changes to the law, which will further clarify exactly how Congress intended for the CFTC to implement the new swap dealer registration requirements under Dodd-Frank. In the law, Congress authorizes CFTC to exclude small financial institutions that provide swaps in connection with loans from the heavy regulations of swap dealers. We did so because we understood the importance of allowing these institutions and allowing these institutions the ability to package together loans and hedging instruments. Offering loans in this way allows small financial institutions to offset some of their underlying risk and offer the lower loan rates to local farmers, ranchers, and small businesses. These lower rates mean that businesses that sustain our rural communities will have greater access to the capital they need to continue to invest in their growing businesses. With the entity definitions recently released by the CFTC, although not yet published in the Federal Reserve, the CFTC took steps towards resolving the issues addressed by H.R. 3336. However, it left some undone. Unfortunately, the current rule is silent on the commodity swaps for agriculture businesses, is unnecessarily restrictive for farm credit system institutions, and applies arbitrary time restrictions on excluded swaps. H.R. 3336 would strengthen the rule passed by the CFTC by expanding the scope of the exemption to protect the way rural America has long done business. The farms, ranches, and small businesses in the district I represent have never been and never will be a part of a systemic failure of our financial system. Neither they nor the small institutions that serve them ought to be considered as a threat. Today's legislation is carefully tailored to ensure that we do not shackle small businesses and family farms with rules that ought to apply and are meant to police the largest Wall Street banks. I want to thank Ms. Hartzler for the work that she's done on shepherding this bill through committee. She's been a staunch advocate for protecting small businesses and from the overreach of Dodd-Frank. I would also like to thank the Ranking Member Boswell, my counterpart on the General Farm Committees and Risk Management Subcommittee, our Chairman, Mr. Lucas, and Ranking Member Mr. Peterson for their continued efforts at comity and bipartisanship on the House Agriculture Committee. Like many bills moved through our committee this year, H.R. 3336 passed with unanimous bipartisan support. This is a testament to the leadership on both sides of the aisle and to the carefully crafted bill that Ms. Hartzler introduced. With those remarks, Madam Speaker, I urge swift adoption of the Small Business Credit Availability Act, and I yield back my remaining time.
Gentleman from Texas yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Madam Speaker, I would note to my colleague, the ranking member, I have one additional speaker, and then myself or whatever close I may have.
Well, I guess I'll reserve until we get to the end.
Absolutely. Madam Speaker,
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
I yield to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Holmgren, 2 minutes.
Gentleman from Illinois, recognized for 2 minutes.
Chairman Lucas, thank you so much for your support on this issue. It has been a pleasure working with you and your staff during my first term here in Congress and on the Ag Committee. In the committee this year, we have worked hard to protect farms and small businesses from Dodd-Frank red tape, and that's why I rise today in strong support of Representative Vicki Hartzler's resolution. H.R. 3336 reduces unnecessary regulatory burdens on small financial institutions to ensure they can continue to provide capital to small businesses in their communities. The bill ensures that small financial and farm credit institutions will continue to be able to provide swaps to their loan customers without being considered or registered as swap dealers. I am pleased that the CFTC has come out with a ruling more favorable than the original legislation, but I think it's important still to note that this bill ensures that the CFTC provides an exemption from clearing for small financial institutions that are hedging their own risks. I also want to thank my colleague, Illinois colleague, Congressman Bobby Schilling, for his work on this bill. He added a provision particularly important for companies like John Deere and Caterpillar, which has facilities in my district. I yield back. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Illinois yields back his time. The gentleman from Minnesota.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Again, this bill clarifies what was the original intent of the Dodd-Frank deliberations. A lot of what, some of what's in this bill I think has already been resolved, but there's some clarifications here. If there is duplication, it doesn't do any harm. So we support this bill and encourage that it be adopted.
Does the gentleman yield back the balance of his time?
I yield back.
Gentleman from Minnesota yields back his time. The gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself the balance of my time.
Gentleman's recognized.
I think, as we've heard here today, this piece of legislation is an effort in a very bipartisan way to address some of the issues in Dodd-Frank that need to be fixed. If you care about production agriculture, if you care about Main Street business, if you care about the people who work in the factories that produce the products and do the things that make this great economy move forward, then you'll support H.R. 3336. It won't affect the 5 biggest financial institutions that do 96% of this kind of business, but it will help the people who really toil and struggle every day to make a living. It will help the small communities where those good folks live in. It's a positive effort to address issues that have come to light in the course of the Ag Committee's exhaustive hearings. I simply thank my colleague, Congresswoman Hartzell, for working diligently on this bill. I thank the ranking member and my colleagues. Let's vote for H.R. 3336. Let's try and help the folks back home. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
All time having been expired, the question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 3336 as amended? Those in favor will signify by saying aye. Opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chairs, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended.
I ask for recorded vote.
Gentlelady from New York.
I request a recorded vote.
Does the gentlelady ask for the yeas and nays?
Yes.
The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having arisen, the yeas and nays are ordered pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20. Further proceedings on this question will be postponed. Purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to take from the Speaker's table H.R. 4348 with the Senate amendment thereto, disagree to the Senate amendment, and agree to the conference requested by the Senate.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4348, an act to provide an extension of federal aid highway safety, motor carrier safety, transit, and other programs funded out of the Highway Trust Fund, pending enactment of a multi-year law reauthorizing such programs and for other purposes.
Without objection, the motion is adopted. For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
And the clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Rahal of West Virginia moves that the managers on the part of the House at the conference on the disagreeing votes of the two houses on the Senate amendment to the bill H.R. 4348 be instructed to recede from disagreement to the amendment of the Senate.
Pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 22, the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. Rahal, and the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, each will control 30 minutes, and the chair now recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, the long-term authorization of surface transportation programs expired on September 30th, 2009. Since that time, Congress has enacted 9 separate surface transportation extension acts, allowing us to continue to limp along, patching together our nation's surface transportation system. These short-term start and stop surface transportation extension acts are undermining our surface transportation system. Running these programs through short-term extensions creates tremendously uncertainty among state departments of transportation, public transit agencies, and highway and transit contractors that delay critical highway and transit projects, costing good-paying jobs each step of the way. With more than 2.5 million construction and manufacturing workers still out of work, it is far past time for Congress to enact surface transportation legislation that will remove this uncertainty, create and sustain family wage jobs, and restore our nation's economic growth. That's why I offer this motion today. We have an opportunity before us to move quickly, to pass legislation that can remove this uncertainty and get America back to work. Over a month ago, the Senate passed S. 1813, known as MAP 21, by an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote of 74 to 22. Now, each of us in this body know how difficult it is for the other body to agree on just about anything. But unlike the House, the Senate was able to come together to pass bipartisan legislation that will provide states with the certainty that they need to move forward with highway and transit projects and get Americans back to work. It is time for the House, believe it or not, to follow the other body's lead and pass S. 1813. Certainly S. 1813 is not the exact bill that I would have written. However, the Senate bill is a dramatic improvement over what House Republicans proposed in their now-dead partisan reauthorization bill known as H.R. 7, which was reported by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee but never acted upon by the full House. Last week, in an effort to facilitate a conference with the Senate on Map 21, the House of Representatives passed H.R. 4348, another surface transportation extension bill. I supported the House passage of H.R. 4348 as a vehicle to go to conference on the Senate bill. I said then that, taking Republicans at their word that they are serious about moving this process forward, passage of that short-term extension bill would allow us to quickly convene a conference with the Senate on its bipartisan, multi-year surface transportation reauthorization bill, which passed with the support of 3/4 of the other body. A long-term bill would provide the certainty that states need to invest and proceed with their plans long on the books. It will provide the certainty that highway and transit contractors desperately need to give them the confidence to hire that one more worker. That is what the surface transportation is all about, putting Americans back to work and sustaining our economic competitiveness. If there are issues that we must change, we can address those through a technical corrections bill that will make the necessary policy changes to improve the bill. That is not unprecedented. We've done it before. There's nothing to prevent the Congress from enacting S. 1813 and then continuing to work to develop further bicameral, bipartisan changes to further improve surface transportation programs and policies. But American workers should not have to wait any longer as Congress searches for an agreement. The time for political games is over. So my motion is simple, very simple. It instructs House conferees to agree to the Senate bill. Enactment of Map 21 will put in place 18 months worth of funding, provide state DOTs and public transit agencies the certainty they need to advance projects, and provide contractors the certainty they need to hire that one more worker. Out-of-work Americans simply cannot wait any longer. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from West Virginia reserves his time. The gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I rise in opposition to the motion to instruct and yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I want to take a little bit of time to explain to you, Madam Speaker, and my colleagues and others who may be listening to this debate about what's happening now. The other side of the aisle has just offered a motion to instruct, and we're going to conference on an important piece of legislation. That's the transportation bill that sets the transportation policy for the United States of America for all of our transportation projects. Those projects that would be eligible, we identify the terms of participation for states and local governments and everyone who is going to receive federal funds for transportation projects. So all that is very important, and it is important that we put people to work. When I go back home, I talk to people who lost their house, lost their job, and they want an opportunity to work. And you heard that, in fact, there have been 9 amendments since the bill expired, and 6 of those were passed. Extensions were passed under the Democrats. I've had to do 3. They had complete control of the U.S. House of Representatives, the United States Senate, and the White House, and still had to pass 6 extensions. And then I learned from our staff that they did not pass a single freestanding extension. And before we left for Easter, I passed a freestanding extension to get us so that we wouldn't close down jobs, that we wouldn't stop contracts, that we wouldn't stop people working. Now, they're asking us to take the Senate carte blanche proposal, which was adopted by the Senate, not a total vote, but it was a bipartisan vote, and just adopt it in their motion to instruct. Now, Madam Speaker, I just got through explaining the Constitution to a wonderful group of young people from the Stetson Baptist Christian School in DeLand, Florida, on the steps just a few steps from here, right out that door and down those steps, and they stood there. And I explained to them that the Founding Fathers created two houses that they, in the first body that they created, most important, the Congress of the United States, a legislative branch with a house. And yes, young people and teachers and chaperones that were listening, I said, and also with a Senate. And they did that because they wanted all of those opinions to come together, and they wanted us to work, again, in a bipartisan fashion, to come up with the best possible solution. Yes, they'd operated with Articles of Confederation, with a unicameral government, but last time I checked, down the hall, I think if we open those doors and look down there, there is a United States Senate, and this is the People's House, the People's House of Representatives. And I also explained to the students, this is the only body in which the members actually have to be elected. Everybody else can be appointed. The senators could be appointed. The president could actually, you could replace him by appointment, the vice president. But the only federal representative that they have is the House of Representatives. But what they want to do is cast the participation of the House of Representatives aside and just adopt what the Senate has brought forward. And I tell you that the House has worked hard. Now, I didn't have the benefit of 6,300 earmarks, which my predecessor had, to pass a bill. So it's taken me a little bit longer, and a few days ago we did pass a bill. It wasn't the bill that we passed out of committee, H.R. 7, with all the Republican votes but one, and we tried to bring to the House. It wasn't the vote that we heard in committee for some 18 hours, most of the time consumed not with Republican amendments but with Democrat amendments, over 100 Democrat amendments. And I said we're going to sit there as long as it takes, give everyone an opportunity to participate in this free and open process, which we are doing here. But today they propose closing down that free and open process. Let's just adopt what the Senate tossed over to us. And I say no. And I say no for a whole host of reasons. The Senate proposal is a proposal that will bankrupt the trust fund. The Senate proposal is a path to just building paths, to resurfacing, to short-term jobs, not answering the call of people who sent us here to make certain that their transportation money, when they go fill up their gas tank, pay for for 1 gallon of gas, 18.4 cents comes to Washington in the trust fund, and we spend it. That's what this sets the policy for, what's eligible for receiving those federal dollars. But we'll just forget that there's a House of Representatives and cast that body aside. I think not. I think not. I think even an 8th grader from one of my schools at home can figure this one out, Madam Speaker. And I just can't agree with this motion to recommit, and I'll reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Florida reserves. Gentleman from West Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself 1 minute.
Gentleman's recognized.
In order to respond to the distinguished chairman, you know, that's funny, and I appreciate the history lesson he's just given us on legislation in this body, but it's funny, while you were speaking to students from your district, I was just speaking with students from my district outside on the Capitol steps as well. They happen to have been from Webster High School, from Webster Springs, West Virginia. And I explained to them the process that we're in right now, going to conference on the transportation bill, how the other body had passed in a bipartisan fashion, the other body who can rarely agree on anything, including a resolution saying I love mother, but here they came together and passed a bill with 72 votes in a bipartisan fashion. I'd explained to them briefly what the other body's bill did and what our bill did. That's funny. They all were not in agreement. Said we ought to accept the Senate bill, go for the Senate bill. So I guess the point I'm making is that we all know how this place works, and we all know the difficulties in getting something through the other body where, like it or not, the framers of our Constitution set it up so that the minority in that body has the power. Madam Speaker, I yield, how much time you want, Peter? 3 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Oregon, the ranking member on our Highways and Transit Subcommittee, Mr. Peter DeFazio.
Gentleman from Oregon for 3 minutes.
In a bitterly divided Congress along partisan lines, I think there's one thing we can all agree upon. America is falling apart. Our nation's infrastructure, according to 2 reports from commissions that met during the Bush administration when the Republicans controlled the House, the White House, and the Senate, came to the same conclusion. We are vastly underinvesting in our national transportation infrastructure. We're not even spending enough to bring the Eisenhower-era investments up to a state of good repair. 150,000 bridges need repair or replacement. 40% of the pavement on the national highway system needs to be substantially rebuilt, not just paved over. And a $60 to $70 billion backlog on critical capital investments for our legacy transit systems across America. The good news is, if we make these investments, we'll put millions of people to work, and not just construction workers, not just engineers, manufacturing steel for the bridges, manufacturing for light rail cars, for street cars. First made in America streetcars in 70 years are being produced at Oregon Iron Works, and the components are sourced from 24 states in the United States of America. We have the strongest Buy America requirements in our transportation sector, and I hope that we can agree as we move forward through this conference to strengthen those even more so we don't leak these precious tax dollars and jobs overseas like we do in so many other ways. Now, I understand the reluctance of the majority, and they will prevail here today to say, let's do the Senate bill now and move on. Let's put people back to work starting next week. But I've got to caution the majority. They will prevail today. But these temporary extensions are costing us jobs. They aren't status quo, let's just extend 90 days and 90 days. We are getting substantiated reports from the 50 states that they are delaying or canceling transportation investments and projects for this construction season because of the uncertainty about federal funding. Time is of the essence here. In the northern tier states, we've got to get this bill done before we take, well, we got a break next week, then we're back for, I think, 7 legislative days, then we got a break the next week, and then we got to come back for another 7 legislative days, then we get a 10-day break after that. We got to squeeze in a little legislative work between these breaks. I believe that if we're determined that we can begin the conference as soon as we are appointed, and we could have this done no later than May 15th before we begin 2 breaks from now, another break. So, we've got to stop taking breaks and give the American people a break and put them back to work. Make the investments they know we need in our nation's infrastructure. I urge support for the minority leader, or excuse me, the ranking member's position.
Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield to the gentleman from Tennessee who also chairs the Highway Subcommittee, Mr. Duncan. 3 minutes.
Gentleman from Tennessee recognized for 3 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank the chairman. I thank Chairman Mica for yielding me this time, and I especially thank him for his long and hard work on this legislation. He's raised several points, Chairman Mica has, as to the problems that this motion to instruct would cause, but let me just mention just a few things. This motion to instruct conferees to accept the Senate bill in its entirety is contrary to the purpose of having a House and Senate conference. It's our responsibility to sit down with our Senate colleagues and address areas where we have differences of opinion. But more importantly, the Senate bill includes provisions that many people have serious concerns about. For example, the Senate bill requires that all new passenger vehicles beginning in 2015 be equipped with an event data recorder. These recorders are similar to the black boxes required on airplanes. While the intent of this purpose is to collect safety information, Many people think this is a slippery slope that we really don't want to go down. Privacy is a big concern for many of my constituents and many people across this country, and this provision would, many people feel, would cross a line would cross the line of federal intrusion into citizens' personal or private lives. There are also other areas where the Senate bill does not go far enough. We've talked about environmental streamlining for years, but everyone on both sides of the aisle know we need to really do something about that now, because other developed nations are doing projects in half the time or less than we are. In the last two federal highway studies, they showed that it took one study showed 13 years, one study said 15 years from conception to completion. And these are not transcontinental highways. These are just relatively short highway projects, and we could be doing those in 6 or 7 years. The Senate bill does not set hard deadlines for federal agencies to approve projects, so they can be delayed and delayed and delayed. It does not allow state environmental laws to be used in place of federal environmental laws. There are some states where the state laws are better. The Senate bill does not expand the list of projects that qualify for categorical exclusions. The Senate bill does not expedite projects that are being rebuilt due to a disaster, such as a bridge on Interstate 35 in Minnesota that was done so very quickly to everybody's great relief. These are issues not addressed in the Senate bill that could be addressed in the conference, and there are many others, as Chairman Micah has pointed out. And let me just say this. Much of the highway bill that the House has produced came from the other side. I understand there were hundreds of letters from Democratic members, and 60% of what was requested in those letters was done by the committee staff. And then we had over 100 amendments in our conference. Can I have 30 seconds more?
30 additional seconds.
And then there were over 100 amendments. We took, we started our markup at I think 9 o'clock in the morning and went until like 3 o'clock the next morning, and we addressed over 100 amendments that were submitted by Democratic members, and I think over 20 of them were put into the bill. So many things were put in by the other side before the bill ever was marked up, and then during the markup. And now we're just supposed to do away with all that and just go with the Senate bill, and I just don't think that's the way we should do. And I urge my colleagues to oppose this motion.
West Virginia.
Thank you.
Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to our distinguished ranking member on the subcommittee on railroads, the gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Corrine Brown.
Gentlelady from Florida is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mrs. Speaker, and to the members of the House. Let me just say, having served on the committee for 19 years, this bill, the House bill, I'm very disappointed with. It's really, Secretary LaHood said it best, it's the worst bill he's seen in 35 years, and of course it's the worst bill I've ever seen. I sat through that markup from 9 in the morning to 3 in the morning, and it was a nightmare. Many of the proposals was dismantles transportation, and I can truly say that, you know, people come to this floor often raving against the Senate. I now say thank God for the United States Senate, because they have come up with a common sense bill that we could fund, pass, and go home, that would fund transportation and really put about 2 million people to work. We have many projects in the Florida area that could benefit from passing a comprehensive transportation, but more than that, we have such a high unemployment rate in Florida, 9%. Of every $1 billion we spend in transportation generates 44,000 permanent jobs. And let me just say that visiting us today at the Capitol is the Hawks family. And we talk about rules and regulations. Well, their daughter was killed because of pollution, and they're visiting here today. When we talk about regulations, surely we got to strike a balance. But we have regulations for a purpose. When we we raise our hand to defend and protect the public, we're talking about the Constitution, but we also have a responsibility to make sure that we protect the public and have a balanced approach and not destroy all of the regulations pertaining to the environment, which is what the House bill did in the markup. So we can go on and on, but let me just tell you as I close, you can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all the time. Pass the Senate bill.
Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2.5 minutes to a gentleman who has authored one of the major amendments to the legislation that passed, Mr. Ribble from Wisconsin.
Gentleman from Wisconsin, recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm struck here this afternoon. I've heard my good friends on the other side of the aisle and their concern. I think it's legitimate that they would like to see long-term certainty into our infrastructure system. And yet, when the highway bill ended in 2009, they controlled the White House, the House of Representatives, and the U.S. Senate, while in the majority of all three levers of government, they chose to extend 6 times the transportation authorization. So here we are once again with another delay tactic, letting the American people wait some more. They know that this motion to instruct is not going to go anywhere because there are important reforms that the American people have told us that they want. One of those reforms was in my amendment. That's part of our bill that streamlined the red tape. Why in the world should we take 15 years to get a highway bill done, a highway project finished, because we're waiting 2/3 of the time to get approvals done? It's nonsensical. But yet we keep on propagating the same problem over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog's Day here. And I have to tell you, Madam Speaker, it gets frustrating after a while. We need to get on with this and move forward with something. Let's get this into a conference so that we can go ahead and take our reforms. The American people have spoken. They spoke in the last election. They decided that they wanted a split government. They wanted the majority over here in the House, a different majority in the Senate. That was their choice. And so the way a bill becomes a law is the Senate does their thing and we do our thing, and then we come together and we negotiate in between to find the best common ground for all Americans, and that's what we plan on doing here. I would very strongly urge my colleagues to vote no on this motion to instruct. Let us get to conference with our reforms and our legislation, the House-passed legislation, the bipartisan House-passed legislation, and let's get on with it so that we can get some certainty put back into this. And with that, I yield back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman from Wisconsin yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from West Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I'm honored to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Texas, a valued member of our committee, Ms. Ada Bernice Johnson.
The gentlelady from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and let me thank my chair, my ranking member and chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I rise to speak in support of the provisions included in the Senate version of the reauthorization. It was my hope that we would have a longer-term bill, one that would reauthorize surface transportation, transit, and rail provisions for several years. And I support the Senate version because it will provide certainty to the state departments of transportation, transit agencies, and contractors that will help create and sustain jobs for out-of-work Americans. Most of the roads and bridges in this country are in serious disrepair, and states and municipalities are unable to address these needs with piecemeal extensions. The Senate bill preserves transit funding and continues funding major transit programs from the Highway Trust Fund. I was very concerned with the elimination of transit funding included in the House version. Transit funds are essential to both urban and rural areas by providing alternative transportation, easing congestion, and reducing emissions. In addition, I support the expansion of TIFIA program to $1 billion annually. and the modifications that make it easier for public transportation agencies with dedicated revenue sources to apply for TIFIA loans. Madam Speaker, we are currently operating under the 9th extension of Safety Lou. This really is unacceptable, and we owe it to the American people to address our crumbling infrastructure and to get them back to work. I voted for the most recent extension of Safety Lou, but for the purpose of getting to where we are now, so we could get to conference and consider the Senate amendment to H.R. 4348 in conference. And I implore my colleagues to support the instructions to put the Senate Transportation Bill before us in conference so that we can bring it to the floor. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Florida.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield 2 minutes to one of the outstanding new members of Transportation Infrastructure Committee, Mr. Bouchon, gentleman from Indiana.
Gentleman from Indiana, recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Speaker, I rise today in opposition to this motion to instruct. The House needs to conference with the Senate and craft a long-term highway bill. In MAP 21, the Senate bill, there's a provision that was offered by Senator Bingaman that provides a disincentive to states and cities to consider partnering with the private sector for fear of losing a percentage of its federal funding. This is only one of the many problems I have with the Senate bill. I ask unanimous consent to introduce a letter from Mayor Bloomberg, former Governor Rendell, and Governor Mitch Daniels from Indiana in regards to that. Thank you. In my state of Indiana, Governor Daniels made the bold move to enter into a public-private partnership for the Indiana Toll Road. Indiana received over $4 billion up front for the lease of this road. When the governor announced this public-private partnership, members of this body were critical of the decision, and some even claimed that it would never work. Not only has it been successful for the Indiana Toll Road, but it has also resulted in over $6.5 billion invested in infrastructure projects throughout Indiana. And after 30 years of planning, Interstate 69 in my district is being built, connecting Evansville, the third largest city in the state, to Indianapolis. The Indiana Toll Road is a perfect example of how business and government can work together to address America's infrastructure needs. The Bingham Amendment ignores these types of successes, and rather than rewarding states for putting the American taxpayer first and pursuing alternative funding for roads, it will punish a state and take away portions of their federal funding. Under the Bingham Amendment, Indiana would lose $72 million. Nevada, I should point out, would lose $66 million. In these challenging fiscal times, public-private partnerships represent an exciting option to many states to better leverage their federal transportation dollars. Congress should take positive steps to encourage innovative financing strategies like public-private partnerships rather than penalizing them. The only way to fully address our nation's infrastructure needs is to involve the private sector. The federal government can't do everything. I yield back.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to yield at this time 2 minutes to our distinguished ranking member on the Water Resources and Environment Committee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Bishop.
Gentleman from New York for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I thank Mr. Ray Hall for yielding. I rise to speak in support of the motion to instruct conferees. This motion would direct conferees to adopt the Senate bill, MAP 21, which I introduced as H.R. 14 in March. This legislation can provide state DOTs, transit agencies, and contractors with the certainty they need to create and sustain jobs for the thousands of Americans who are still out of work as a result of the economic downturn. MAP 21 not only passed overwhelmingly in the Senate with a bipartisan majority of 74-22, but the Senate bill is fully paid for and will save an estimated 1.8 million jobs and create up to 1 million additional jobs when implemented. During a weak economic recovery looking for a jump start, this is precisely what we need to do. Given that H.R. 4348 is merely a 90-day extension of highway programs at current levels with a few policy additions, we could put the construction industry back to work that much faster, given that the construction season is in full swing if this motion to instruct is adopted. MAP 21 has the support of 3/4 of Congress, Senate Democrats, Senate Republicans, House Democrats. It has the support of the White House. It's time that the House Republicans got on board with job creation instead of fighting it. Americans want safe roads and bridges, but above all, they want jobs. The Senate passed the biggest job-creating bill in this Congress by an overwhelming bipartisan margin. The House has done nothing. Let's get this country moving again by passing the Senate bill so the President can sign it. Let's create jobs. Let's make it in America. I urge my colleagues to support this motion to instruct conferees. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida.
Pleased to yield to the chair of the Rail Subcommittee, distinguished member of our Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Schuster, 3.5 minutes.
I thank the
Gentleman
chairman.
from Pennsylvania, recognized for 3.5 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I just want to remind my colleague from New York as he's walking off the floor that it was the Democratic-controlled Congress that was unable to pass a transportation bill when they had control of this body for the past couple of years. And today I come to the floor in opposition to the motion to instruct, and quite frankly I'm surprised, I'm shocked, I'm stunned that my colleagues on the other side are willing to take up a Senate bill, which is a bad bill. And in fact, there's a couple provisions in there that I would think the ranking member of the full committee and the ranking member of the Railroad Subcommittee would embrace. There's a coal ash provision in there, which is going to be good for coal in West Virginia. So that's something that I would hope we'd embrace that going to a conference to come out and save those jobs in West Virginia, create more jobs. And then, of course, the gentlelady from Florida, she embraces the Senate bill, which is going to be a disincentive for private money. And it's my understanding that Florida is a leader when it comes to working with the private sector to build infrastructure. So why in the world would we want to have a disincentive out there for public-private partnerships when Florida will benefit mightily from it? So again, as I said, I'm stunned that we're standing here today with this motion to instruct. The Senate bill fails to make real reforms. It continues the transportation enhancement and safety routes to school programs that mandate bike paths and roadside flowers and walking school bus programs. You'd think that the people in Pennsylvania or Florida or West Virginia didn't love their kids enough that they would be able to instruct them on their own how to go to school safely. And also, the people in Pennsylvania, we need to spend that money not on bike paths, although I love bike paths, I've got them through my district, but the time we face today, it should be focused on repairing those bridges when Pennsylvania has over 5,000 bridges that are in desperate need of repair. Again, the Senate bill continues to mandate that they hire a bike pedestrian coordinator and a safe routes to school coordinator. Like I said, those are things I don't believe belong in this bill. And further, the Senate bill fails, or it creates actually, a national freight program adding to bureaucracy at PennDOT. The new freight program allows states to use up to 10% of their appropriated funds for freight rail projects, which means less money for highways and bridges. I'm an advocate for rail in this country. I don't believe the Class 1s would want anything to do with this, because every time they've got involved with federal money, it takes a lot longer and it's a lot more expensive. So I don't even believe that the Class 1s would embrace a program like this that the Senate's putting forward out there. The federal regulatory provisions for passenger rail provides, including rail authorities that are intended to stifle competition. Once again, there's private sector initiatives going on all over this country when it's coming to commuter rail. Positive train control is another thing. The Senate bill doesn't push that back, which we found the technology is not there, it's not ripe, we don't have it. You can't use alternative forms of safety devices when it comes to positive train control. In addition to that, in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware, SEPTA, they're going to have to spend half